Yeah, welcome everybody. Thanks for stopping by. Like Cindy said, I'm Oscar, and I will be doing my presentation on perspectives of cover cropping. And it's a report on cover cropping efforts in the San Joaquin Valley. So I won't go into too much detail, as Cindy has already mentioned. I'm from LA. I used to live there and moved there about 10 years ago to the San Joaquin Valley to go to UC Merced to get a degree in public health. And did a lot of research, worked in a lot of research labs, worked as a park ranger. And for my first year of GrizzlyCorps, I worked for the cooperative extension at a Fresno County with their small farms team and now work for sustainable conservation. Okay. So a lot of my work this year I spent a lot of time reaching out to different types of organizations, attending workshops, attending meetings, and like hearing a lot of different types of perspectives and different types of conferences. And a lot of that time I got to spend a lot with the GrizzlyCorps fellows. That was a really great positive plus about that. I got to go to a lot of different conferences with them, got to learn from them, and also just enjoy and have fun while I was there. I want to give you all just a little bit of background about my organization and the work we were doing before I get into all my projects and stuff. So, Sustainable Conservation is a nonprofit organization that advances the collaborative stewardship of California's land, air, and water for the benefit of nature and people. We work alongside a lot of growers, policymakers, and organizations to help ensure this economic and environmental sustainability within California. Like Cindy said, I worked for their Solutions in Our Soils team, specifically with their San Joaquin Valley section of their Solutions in Our Soils team, and we did focus a lot of our work on adoption of resilient agriculture practices and systems by leveraging this water lens. So the big thing that happened that caused us to do a lot of our work was the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. This, in short, is called SGMA. This is basically where the state of California passed this act to help curtail the overdraft of groundwater within California. SGMA created what are now known as the Groundwater Sustainability Agencies, or GSAs, who could create groundwater sustainability plans, or GSPs. And they were the ones that were tasked with curtailing the overdraft of water in their respective subbasins and regions. So this is a locally regulated program through their GSAs. So when sustainable conservation was looking around, they saw that a lot of researchers, growers, and community members were concerned with what was going to happen with the implementation of these GSPs and how these plans would allow for sustainable agriculture to continue on. So when sustainable conservation heard these concerns, they convened a group of experts, scientists, researchers, growers, anybody in this field to help them clarify the current science and policy to understand how GSAs could implement these practices into their GSPs. And we specifically chose cover crops because this was a main concern that a lot of researchers and growers were seeing and wanted to know more about. If you don't know, cover crops are non-cash crops planted in fields, usually for a benefit. A lot of the times when we're thinking about cover crops, we're talking about their water benefits, which is their increase in infiltration, water retention, reduce in runoff, and reduce in evaporation. So Sustainable Conservation, with the help of their convening group, published the Cover Cropping in the SGMA Era report, which was to shed light on those, to clarify the science and the policy implementation sides of cover cropping and SGMA. So once they completed this is their next step, was to help them connect with technical assistance providers, organizations that were pushing for cover crops and their benefits for their growers and their GSAs, and to share our findings with them, but to also understand what's going on with them, with their endeavors and advocacy for cover cropping and with their advocacy for GSAs. So that's where I come in. With my capacity building goals for this project, this long-term project, was to share findings and recommendations from our report to those that needed it, to uncover the grower or organization and GSA level perspectives on cover cropping and its water benefits and how it's being adapted and implemented or how it's not, and identify the key barriers and needs for technical assistance providers in their communities in order to help expand the adoption of cover cropping. So a year in view, basically my entire year boiled down to 4 main projects. The first one I did was creating the cover cropping newsletter. This was an effort created by the Solutions in Our Soils team to help us maintain our connections with our convening groups and for other people that may be interested in cover cropping work. I did weekly literature scans and reviews of different types of research, emerging research, or different types of workshops and events that were happening that were surrounding cover cropping, its water benefits, or Sigma. After that, I did a lot of attending meetings. This is where I went to community meetings, workshops, and demonstrations and conferences and tried to learn from all the community leaders and members and researchers that were presenting at these places to better understand, what's going on and to help network for us to find new partners to collaborate in this effort. I also, during that time, was doing a lot of presenting. I did a lot of presentations at these workshops or conferences to help us share our information that we learned from our cover cropping convening groups and to table and also to share our information with other people and other growers that may be interested in some of our work. And then my overarching project for this entire year was the technical assistance provider engagement, where we conducted semi-formal interviews with organizations, technical assistance providers, and other people in this field to share our findings and to better understand what's going on with their efforts for cover cropping in the San Joaquin Valley. So that's mostly what I'm going to be talking about today, was that final project. So the four main things that we found from this, the four key barriers to water smart cover cropping was, first one is the variety of GSAs and their conditions make engagement and advocacy difficult. Two, there are limitations to GSA frameworks for incorporating cover crops and their water benefits. Three, growers do not have access to the right information in the right form, especially those growers outside of the regenerative community of practice. And four, technical assistance providers working to implement cover cropping are siloed, have limited resources, and are facing even bigger resource pressures and uncertainty. Okay, so let's get into it real quick. So the first one are the GSA and local conditions. GSAs are meant to be basically locally driven and region specific to their subbasin, and they only regulate those subbasins that they are in charge of, which means that this kind of locally driven method is really advantageous because it allows them to do things that are very niche to their region, but it also increases the difficulty of understanding how Sigma is being implemented. As you can see in the map, all these little dark lines and circles around here are individual GSAs, and a lot of these regions have multiple in the same spots, meaning that a lot of regions will have multiple GSAs with multiple GSPs and different regulations that can affect multiple growers across their region, which makes advocacy, understanding, and implementation kind of difficult for a lot of technical assistance providers and for growers themselves. So why this matters? Understanding how GSAs are implementing their GSPs is a really important factor to creating effective guidance, education, and advocacy for growers and for technical assistance providers, so they can better understand the regulations and how they can still implement water smart cover cropping into their systems while being compliant with their GSA. There are some technical assistance providers that are doing work that's solely just for advocacy for growers to their GSAs, but they're still pretty new and they're still taking some time to get up to speed. So, limitations in GSA's framework. Some GSAs may not inherently include cover cropping into their plans and could possibly disincentivize cover cropping in their water into their GSPs. Outreach and engagement is a little bit difficult on both ends. For GSAs, some of them have more capacity than others, and also for technical assistance providers in the regions, their capacity is also limited, and they have to deal with multiple GSAs. Many GSAs are, still working on their GSPs and maybe are still writing it or still in the process of writing it or barely in the process of implementing it. So this matters because creating continual advocacy and, making sure to raise these concerns to the GSAs will always be an effective way to voice the concerns of the growers. Even throughout the years, once their GSPs are implemented, GSAs will be continuously updating them and changing them to how they need for their regions. So advocacy will always be a good way to continue. So making sure that we understand the limitations and how to best deal with that is really important. Okay, so grower access to the right information. When it comes to a lot of information, growers like to have a lot of technical ground level information on their side, especially like economic side. When we're thinking about cover cropping, it would be cost per acre, the seeding rate, the water use, management and termination, as well as all the research that talks about its different types of benefits. But when growers go to a lot of these workshops that are meant to, inform them about things, they are prone to information overload. When you walk into like a workshop or a conference, you're handed paper after paper after paper with so much information on them. It's kind of hard to remember and to find out what's the most important thing you need to take away from these stuff. So a lot of the technical assistance providers we interviewed emphasized the need for clear, concise, and efficient education materials, including, one sheet pages, crib sheets, really small stuff, and also emphasizing the importance of YouTube videos, because a lot of growers may not be able to go to these conferences or may not be able to go to these events, but they can scan a QR code or click on a link and they can watch the video from their farm if they need to. So why does this matter? When it comes to technical assistance providers trying to expand their adoption rates, they try to look beyond the regenerative agriculture community, because a lot of the growers that go to these events are already practicing these things or already know about them. So they look for their target audiences, which are these middle of the road growers, those that aren't for or against cover cropping or regenerative agriculture, that may have like very limited knowledge about cover cropping, may want to know more about it, or just, maybe have never heard about it, but they aren't set in their ways and they don't have, conventional farming practices ingrained into their systems, or are more open to changing their practices to serve a better purpose. So creating this clear and concise education and information will help expand adoption into other grower communities. So technical assistance providers are siloed and faced with limited resources. Capacity is a major factor in the ongoing efforts for GSA advocacy, grower education, and programmatic efforts. Many of the technical assistance providers we interviewed emphasize the need for a general network of technical assistance providers in these regions. Basically, basic information of who's working, what they're doing, what their capacities are, and where they're located. This would help to reduce duplicate efforts, help streamline efficiency, and kind of break down the culture of gatekeeping or keeping information just for ourselves, but rather using it for the entire community to make sure that the information and needs of growers and other people that they're serving are being met. So why this matters is because of a lot of the ongoing uncertainty with federal funding programs, jobs, and other stuff like that. It's really important to have a network of growers or network of technical assistance providers that are still working while all these funding cuts and other things like that are very fluid and can change. Having an updated network or repository of these technical assistance providers will help everybody, continue this work and collaborate where everybody is able to. Okay, so some of the successes and barriers we found from, or I found from all these different types of things. When I completed all the interviews, it was really great to hear about, it was a really great way for me to understand what's going on at the ground level, especially for people that deal with farm workers and GSAs together, and understanding what efforts are being made, how we can help with them, and what's the lay of the land for this type of stuff. With the newsletter, it really helped me understand more about what efforts are being done on the research side and academic side, and how we can better take these pieces and, make sure that the right people are seeing them and able to translate them into accessible documents or education materials for their growers and for other people that they serve. And a lot of the conferences and community education was a really great way for me to learn about what's going on in research or in community-based levels, since a lot of these community education workshops are very small and region specific. It let me hear about what was going on with the different types of growers, the different types of people that are serving these communities, and really helped me find out what was going on in the San Joaquin Valley. And some of the challenges and barriers were the federal funding cuts and the AmeriCorps cuts, because a lot of the people we were interviewing at the beginning of the year, reached out back to us after all the federal funding cuts happened in like February, and told us, hey, our entire staff is fired except me, or our funding is cut in half and we can no longer help with this, or things like that. And it helped us change up a bit of our approach to make sure that while we were also giving them information and hearing what they were, what their barriers were, that we could also connect them with other people that were doing similar types of work and make sure that their work was still going to continue on, even with all this funding cuts and everything like that. So yeah, in conclusion, when we started all this work, it was an effort to better understand what was going on and to make sure that the people that needed our information and findings were connecting with it. And we wanted to make sure that we were instilling this culture of collaboration. And the more we interviewed people, the more it became apparent that a lot of technical assistance providers felt the same way. So, I hope that the work we did does help other organizations and helps us collaborate with them and achieve and ensure a resilient future. So, yeah. All right. Well, thank you. If there are any questions.